Good morning and welcome to the Global Salon series. This is our first presentation of the semester. And in the Global Salon series, what we try to do is provide a variety of topics that are of interest to students, to faculty that have some global or international perspective. And so today we're very fortunate to have Ms. Melissa Gonerman, who is the Associate Director for the Center for International Programs. And today she's going to talk to us about the state of study abroad with COVID-19 and where we're at with the pandemic as things start to move back to some sense of normalcy. So thank you very much, Melissa, for your presentation today. And let me start also by saying that we do have a Q&A option. If you want to ask a question as we go throughout, you can post those at the bottom. There's a link, a Q&A. You can post that question, and then we'll take a few moments at the end today to address those questions. So thank you again, Melissa, and I'll turn it over to you to begin your presentation.
All right. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me here today to talk about study abroad in the age of COVID-19 and what has changed and what's still the same, because education abroad was definitely hit hard by COVID-19, but there are a lot of misperceptions about the reality of the situation currently. So I hope I can share a little bit about that reality here at USI. I am going to focus on the situation here at USI. I might mention a little bit about some other institutions, but really today's presentation is going to be about how it's impacted for USI. So I think it's important to start with where the pandemic began. And I want to start here because these are things that if you're thinking about going abroad, to study abroad, do an internship abroad, these are the types of scenarios you want to be prepared for if you're going to be going abroad during a pandemic. So back in February, one of our students was preparing to study abroad in South Korea. South Korea academic calendar is different from our US academic calendar. So students typically will go in late February and they'll begin their classes in March. So this student was notified on early February that the government was going to allow the universities to push back the start by 2 weeks. The student tried to change the airline ticket, but the airline wouldn't allow it. So the student decided to keep the original February 24th flight date. Then we get to February 24th, very early in the morning because we're looking at time zone differences. So at 3 a.m. our time, the university in South Korea notified all exchange students that they could withdraw because COVID-19 was starting to grow in South Korea now, in addition to in China, that students could withdraw from their exchange with no penalties from the university. Unfortunately, this student was already in transit, had a very early flight that morning. By the time that message was seen, the student was already at a different airport in the US where they were transiting from Evansville to their international flight. So the student decided to keep going. Everything else was still staying the same, but as that day went, as the student was on the plane, the situation changed very quickly. And by the time the student arrived, they checked into their housing, and by the next day, their program was suspended by their study abroad partner, and they were told to return home immediately. So then the student had to scramble to get back. The airline wouldn't change the ticket. The student had to purchase a new flight to return home at an out-of-pocket cost, and then figure out what to do with the rest of the semester. Because remember, we're at the end of February here, so it's way too late to just jump into regular classes here at USI. So a lot of arrangements had to be made with some wonderful faculty members, and this happened to be a College of Liberal Arts student. So with the Dean's Office and the College of Liberal Arts to be able to make special arrangements for independent studies for the student to be able to maintain the full-time status that was necessary to stay on track for graduation, but also a firm requirement for this particular student's financial aid. Had that not been allowed, the student would have had some significant financial aid consequences. Once the student did return, then the student also had to isolate for 14 days, and out of concern for immediate family's health, the student had to find another relative's home that was at less risk in order to isolate, just in case the student had brought anything back. Shortly after that, the U.S. Department of State issued a level 3 global health advisory telling all U.S. citizens to return immediately. That was issued in the evening of March 11th. The next day, USI issued a statement from Dr. Rashan, the university president, asking all study abroad students to return home immediately. So students over the next 2 weeks were trying to make arrangements, trying to get back, difficulties changing flights, same kinds of challenges the first student had. They were all able, those who were already in programs abroad were able to continue their courses online, but there was a big delay for a lot of that and figuring out how that would happen, what the content would be like for those who were in intensive language programs that suddenly got shifted to online. There was definitely a disappointment on the part of the students in that because you're not immersed in the language all the time anymore. Suddenly you're just checking in once a week for an hour meeting. So big changes. And it also took most of 2020 and well into 2021 for some of the programs in order for students to receive refunds for their programs that were cut short. So those are a lot of things that you might not be thinking about if you're thinking about studying abroad during a pandemic, because we are still in a pandemic. We halted study abroad completely for summer 2020, fall 2020, and spring 2021. While we assessed the situation, looked at what's going on, thought about it from a risk management perspective, and we want to make sure that anyone we're sending abroad is as safe as possible. But also, we were evaluating the philosophical perspective, like should the university tell you you can't go if you want to go? And that's a kind of a fine line between trying to make sure that we're keeping students as safe as possible with these experiences, but also not controlling your ability to make your own informed decision. So we had a large committee all of 2020 and into the beginning of 2021 with campus representation from all of the colleges, as well as the provost's office, risk management, international programs, looking at what does USI think international education should look like during a pandemic, because we know it's not going away anytime soon. It's going to be around for some time. And while we had been halting study abroad, we didn't want to keep it halted forever. So that committee made some recommendations to the provost, which were approved. And the provost determined to start allowing study abroad on a case-by-case consideration beginning in summer 2021. Now, what does that mean? What is that case-by-case consideration? Historically, USI's travel abroad policy for students has been that if the US Department of State says US citizens should not travel somewhere or should reconsider traveling somewhere, then we have not allowed study abroad at those destinations. With COVID-19, almost every country in the world was redesignated as should not travel or should strongly reconsider travel. So even as we were beginning to consider opening up study abroad again, it was conflicting with this existing policy that we had. So we developed a pop-up policy, which you can review on the study abroad website, that explains that if that decision of should not travel or should reconsider travel is based only on COVID-19, not based on other factors, then we can do this case-by-case consideration. Now, if that decision is based on other things such as political unrest or violent crime, then we still will not allow a student to study abroad in that destination. So what does this case-by-case consideration look like? We looked at, what are the things we're looking for here? What are the things we're making sure that we're doing on this campus? Quarantine support, meal deliveries, distancing, masking, contact tracing, all of those things that we want to make sure are in place according to CDC guidance here. We want to make sure the sites abroad are doing the same thing. And we also want to make sure that they're following the local and country guidance of that location. So we have a big questionnaire that we send to the site for them to complete. And then we have a study abroad risk management committee that meets and reviews that information, as well as information from the embassy in the country abroad, and some other sources that we use to see what's going on in that country and see what the situation is. Then that risk management group makes a recommendation to the provost, and the provost ultimately makes the final decision about whether or not to approve a location. Now, the provost has reserved the right to rescind any approval that he gives for study abroad, because One of the things that we all know about COVID-19 is it's unpredictable. None of us know what's going to happen going forward. So we make the best plans that we can, but if the situation changes, then that approval could be rescinded. So what has changed with study abroad? Quite a bit. One of the things is that programs and locations have been drastically reduced or restricted. Some of that is due to closed borders. Australia and New Zealand, for example, they still have their borders completely closed. They opened them up a little bit and then closed them back up. So that's kind of, we're watching that, but there are no study abroad programs in those countries at all because they have their borders completely closed. Some sites have been dropped. Our partners, as less students are going abroad, they can't maintain all of the different study abroad programs and all of the locations that they had before. So they've reduced the number of sites that they have available. So programs that your older siblings or upperclassmen friends may have done may not be available in the current year or even the following year. And then some locations are not handling COVID-19 very well, where we've historically had study abroad as an option. So those locations are restricted because COVID is a little bit too out of control. Another difference is that you have to start planning even earlier than before. It's always been a good idea to start planning study abroad early. We recommend first-year students to attend an information session and meet with our office to start planning, when in their 4-year degree study abroad could fit in. That's still 100% true with studying abroad during the pandemic. But when it comes to actually time to apply to a program, that needs to be even earlier. A year in advance would be great because we have to go through this site review process before you can move forward with your application. So a lot of things that used to happen after you applied to a program are now happening in advance of applying to the program. So that takes more time. And as you can imagine, doing something like that site review, pulling a committee together, getting it to the provost having time to evaluate it, all of that takes time. So in a, kind of the fastest scenario would be about 2 weeks for that process. But a realistic scenario would be more like a month for that process to happen. Students who are thinking about going abroad need to be comfortable with ambiguity. Again, there's so many things that we don't know, that we can't predict. We don't know, you're looking at going abroad even this spring to a particular country. They may not require a COVID vaccine right now, but they might by the time you leave. They may not require you to do special forms right now to enter the country, but they might put those in place by the time that you leave. Dates may change. Most of the partners are not even giving final dates for spring yet because they're kind of watching week by week to see how the situation is in the particular country before that's determined. It may be that courses are supposed to be in person and then you get there and there's an increase in cases and courses are moved online. So you're physically there, but you're taking your courses online. All of that ambiguity and unknown can be very difficult for some people. And if that's something that is very difficult for you to handle and it's going to make your stress unmanageable, then perhaps studying abroad right now isn't the best option for you. You have to be honest with yourself about what you can handle. And right now, studying abroad is a pretty big piece. So it's a possibility, but it's definitely has a higher stress component to it than pre-COVID-19. You have to have a plan A, a plan B, and even possibly a plan C. So plan A would be your term abroad, whether that's the semester or the summer, but then you're also going to plan for being here. The provost has asked all students who are going abroad to still register for classes here, keep your plan here. So that way, if anything comes up at the last minute and your program is canceled, you're not going to run into problems getting into the classes here. We'll have you drop those classes, when you leave for your program or when our semester is about to start, just to make sure that space is available for anyone else who wants to add it or is on a wait list. But you'll have to have both plans. So you're not just planning your semester or your summer abroad, you're also planning for what you would do if you stay here. And then in some cases, we have students looking at locations that we feel pretty good about, but the location is maybe a little bit on the edge. So with that location, we're recommending make your study abroad plan for that location, but let's also work with the partner and come up with a plan C location to still study abroad if things get out of control in that location and we have to shift you to another location. A good example of that right now is Costa Rica. So I have a student who wants to study abroad in Costa Rica this spring, is planning on taking Spanish courses, and that's why the student wants to go to Costa Rica. So we've got the backup plan for that is Spain, that if we need to shift, we can shift to Spain, and there's still time to do that. We've identified a program with the courses and it's with the same provider. So it's a lot of planning for different contingencies. Prior to COVID-19, especially students who traveled abroad to European countries, but other locations as well, it was a lot of exploring multiple countries while abroad. That had become the model of study abroad, is going and seeing as many places as you can while you're abroad. But now, with so many countries having restrictions on travel, you may be able to travel to neighboring countries, you may not. It may be that you could travel to neighboring countries, but you're going to have a really long quarantine when you get back, and that makes it unrealistic. Some countries, even European countries, have travel restrictions within the country. So even within the country, you may not be able to go everywhere. So it's shifting to being more what study abroad used to be 20 years ago or so, where it was more of a deep dive into one country's culture. So that's kind of, a cool thing too, because with this more recent shift of exploring multiple countries and as many places as you can go while you're abroad, that resulted in a little bit less of a deep dive into the culture of the country that you're studying abroad in. So it's kind of nice to see that shift. One's not better than the other, they're just different. Both are great experiences. But if your idea of what study abroad should be is, going to a European country and seeing 8 different countries while you're there, that might not be possible in the upcoming year. Another thing that's different is if the pandemic worsens, USI will not make you come home early. That decision will be up to you. So be sure that you're comfortable with the consequences of making that decision. It's a big decision. Remember, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, when things got bad, we told everyone to come home. That was a university decision. We said, come back to the States, be with your support people, do your classes online. We want you to be here to be safe. But if you go now, we know it's a pandemic. We know what the risks are. So if you choose to go, it will be your choice whether or not to come home. Another element is that U.S. embassies and consulates have been closed around the world due to the different COVID-19 restrictions in countries, and lots of embassies and consulates are doing remote work and limited visa processing. So why do I bring that up with study abroad? I bring that up because that means that there have not been as many international students who want to come to the United States who've been able to do that because they can't get their student visas and they can't get here. It's not that they're not being admitted, they're being admitted, at the same rates, but they haven't been able to get their visas at the same rates. So what that means is that all of the exchange programs that need someone to leave that university and come here in order for there to be a space for one of our students to go there, those exchanges are getting really off balance, where there's not as many spaces available abroad to enter a program. Another thing that's different is that while USI does not require a COVID-19 vaccine for students, many countries and study abroad programs are requiring it. So if you've personally made a decision not to be vaccinated, you'll want to think long and hard about that if you're planning to study abroad. We highly recommend that all students who are studying abroad do get vaccinated, because it's constantly changing and countries are adding that requirement. You wouldn't want to be in a situation where you're planning to go, it's a week before your trip, and suddenly the country is putting a requirement in effect immediately that you have to be fully vaccinated before you go, because it's difficult to get fully vaccinated in just 1 week. So if you're planning on studying abroad and you haven't been vaccinated, now's a good time to start thinking about that and thinking whether or not you're willing to get vaccinated. If you are unwilling to be vaccinated, then look very closely at the countries you're considering to see if they will even allow you to enter without being vaccinated. So those are some of the differences of study abroad due to COVID-19. Now I want to kind of shift and talk about what is still the same. One thing that hasn't changed is our Center for International Programs commitment. We still want to make studying abroad as affordable and as accessible as possible for all USI students. To do that, we've maintained all of our study abroad program partnerships. We did lose one partner that closed down during the pandemic, but the rest of our partners, we've been able to maintain them and maintain those options. There's a lot of good reasons to consider studying abroad, and these also haven't changed. I like to highlight reason number 2, enhancing your career opportunities and growing your network. That is my number 1 reason why all USI students should consider going abroad, and I'll give you some data to support that in just a minute. It's of course, such a great experience to be able to expand your worldview by being in another country. Many of our programs, especially our semester programs, students are abroad with students from other countries as well. So it's not just American students in the program. So not only are they getting the worldview of the students in the host country, but also all of these other countries' students who are represented in the classroom as well. Get to experience another culture firsthand. Making new friends from around the world is huge. I like number 6 a lot too, discovering new things about your own culture. This is one of my favorite things to watch as a study abroad advisor. Because before we go abroad, most of us haven't really thought about what it means to be who we are, how we identify ourselves, what it means to be, I'm from Iowa originally, what it means to be a Midwesterner from Iowa. But once you go abroad, suddenly you're going to get all these questions about, why do Americans do this? Why do Americans think that? And it lumps you in with everybody, and it makes you really stop and think about, well, do I do that? Do I believe that? And you really get a much stronger sense of self and your own culture and appreciation for home and where you've come from. Of course, you're going to fall in love with the country where you go, but you're also going to learn so much more about yourself while you're there. You're going to strengthen your communication, team building, and adaptability skills. Those are huge for getting out into the workforce. Any of you who've already had a job, you know how important those skills are, and study abroad helps you build those soft skills. So as promised, here's some information, some research about career skills and study abroad. So this research was done by the American Association of Colleges and Universities back in 2010. So it's getting a little bit dated, but there hasn't been a repeat of this type of study. So we still like to bring this one up. But what they did was they surveyed employers to ask employers, what are the skills you're looking for when you're hiring? And these are the top 10 skills that employers said they were looking for. Now, this study then also looked at students who are studying abroad, pre and post study abroad, to see what skills are gained through study abroad. So everything that's in white here are skills that are gained through study abroad. So there's a 70% overlap between the skills that our employers are looking for and the skills that are gained through study abroad. One of my favorite things about this study is it showed it didn't matter what type of program the student was doing, they were still gaining these skills. So that's important to me because sometimes students think that, oh, if I'm going to try to get these career skills through study abroad, I have to go for a really long program, and that's just not, I'm not comfortable doing that, or my budget doesn't allow that, or my degree plan doesn't allow that, so I can't do this to gain career skills. That's not true. Any type of program, you gain them. So it doesn't matter if it's a week-long spring break embedded program through the social work program, or if it's a full year abroad, you're still going to gain these skills. Now, obviously, if you do a very short program, like a 1-week program, you probably won't gain as many of the skills as a student that does a longer program, but you will still have the opportunity to gain those skills. We help you maximize this when you come back from study abroad. We do a workshop partnering with the Career Services Office to help you take all of those things that you did while you were abroad and figure out what skills those line up to. And then we also do some mock interviewing to help you talk about your study abroad experience and figure out how to share those experiences with employers to show how they demonstrate these skills. So this one is a more recent study that was done in 2020, but it was done with data pre-pandemic. What this chart is showing is that these are the skills that employers are looking for. And then the bar are the percentage of applicants who studied abroad who have those skills. And the dots are the other applicants who had not studied abroad. So you can see for all of these skills, students who studied abroad have more of those skills than students who did not. So studying abroad is a great way to take classes that you need for your degree anyway, but also make yourself stand out more in the career field. When you go out and apply for jobs, you're going to be applying for jobs, many of you with other USI students competing for the same jobs, or other area universities where you have a similar background, similar major, similar classes, similar clubs and organizations and experiences before. So this is one way to help make yourself stand out even more. You can see nationally 1 in 10 undergraduates study abroad before graduating. So it really does help you stand out. What types of programs do we have at USI? We have exchange programs, direct programs, faculty-led, and internships, volunteering, and service learning. We lump those 3 together because they all come in as internship credit here. Now, exchange and direct are what you typically think about when you think about studying abroad. You think about getting on a plane, going somewhere, taking classes somewhere, coming back, and then those classes applying to your USI degree. That's what both of those programs do. The difference between exchange and direct is how you pay for it. With exchange, you're paying for the space here at USI. With direct, you're paying for the space at the program abroad. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. We still have programs all over the world. Not all of these are active right now. Not all of them have open borders right now, but our partners are still maintaining these locations in hopes of having them available again before too long. Okay, so I'm going to give an overview of the partners that we work with, and I like to start with ISAF because ISAF is our only partner that has both those direct programs and exchange programs. They also do internships if you're interested in an internship. So with a direct program, you'll see when you look at the program a cost for the program. And that cost typically includes your tuition and your housing. It doesn't usually include a meal plan. And they'll have criteria for the program, what minimum GPA, do you need any special essays or things to apply, and the application deadline. So with direct programs, as long as you meet the published criteria and the price is affordable to you, you can apply to the program, you'll get accepted. There's no competing for spaces. With exchange, those ones you're going to compete for spaces. So you'll do one exchange application with up to 10 universities on that list. So we work together to make sure that you've got a good solid list. If your top universities that you want to attend are very competitive, then we'll work to find some more locations that you would be happy with that are less competitive. So you have a nice balanced list. So you submit that one application with up to 10 universities, and then you switch places with another student from abroad. You pay for your space here at USI, and then you receive the equivalent benefit abroad. So ISAF Exchange is really popular for students who want to do a semester in Europe or South Korea or Japan. Those are all locations where it's more expensive than here at USI. So the exchange model works really well. One of the super nice things about ISAF Exchange is it's not a one-to-one exchange. So if you choose to attend a university in the United Kingdom and you're placed there, that doesn't mean a student from that exact university has to pick USI, which is good for us because most international students, when they're looking for their study abroad, they start looking at the coast, right? Everybody wants to go to the East Coast, West Coast. They're not usually looking in the Midwest right away. With ISAF, we just need a student from somewhere to come here and we can send a student anywhere. So it's not one-to-one, it's just anywhere in the network. So it gives a lot of flexibility for the study abroad. You do have to apply early with the ISAF process. For spring placement, the deadline is September 15th. For fall placement, the deadline is March 1st. So this slide shows you when you go on ISAF Exchange for this upcoming spring semester, this is what would be charged to the Versa account. So you're charged for 15 credit hours of in-state tuition and fees, a shared room on campus, and a full meal plan. In addition to that, there is what we call a vacation meal allowance, because remember, you're not paying for yourself, you're paying for the student who's coming in to take your place. And there are times when food services are closed, like we just had fall break, food services completely closed. So the person who comes in will get that $225 as cash that they can use to buy groceries or eat in restaurants during the times when their meal plan won't cover their meals. And then all programs have a study abroad administrative fee that helps cover the software that we use for study abroad. So you can see the total amount is just over $10,000. That's billed to your Bursar account. And then your financial aid and your scholarships will typically apply as usual to your study abroad. I do want to point out that all study abroad programs the program fee gets charged to your Bursar account. It's not only ISAF Exchange, all of them apply to your Bursar account so that you can apply your scholarships and financial aid. In addition to the part that's charged to the Bursar, though, you want to be thinking about what are the rest of my out-of-pocket expenses? What's it really cost for the whole semester abroad? Because just like here, you pay your tuition, your housing, your meal plan, but you have other expenses. If you have a car, you're paying for gas, you're going out and doing things, you're buying your books. There are other expenses. So out-of-pocket expenses, these are going to range based on location and where you're going, but you'll be wanting to consider your mandatory health insurance. You do have to get international health insurance while you're abroad. You need to maintain your US health insurance too, because they cover different things. Round trip airfare, visa fees, if applicable. Some locations don't require, but many do. Local transportation, books, personal expenses, leisure travel. So you can see a range down at the bottom here of 2,785 up to 6,900. So it really does vary based on the location and also the students' habits. Okay, so after ISAF Exchange, we do have some what we call direct exchange partnerships. I know this terminology is confusing, so never hesitate to ask us, what is that again? Direct exchange partnerships, what these are ones where USI has a signed agreement directly with this university. So we're not going through any sort of partner on this one. We have partnerships with the University of Tsukuba in Japan, Southwest University in China, and then there's two universities in Osnabrück, Germany. The University of Osnabrück, which is more of the liberal arts university, and then the Hochschule Osnabrück, which is the University of Applied Sciences. So that's where you'll have business, engineering, and some of those types of programs. With the USI exchange partnerships, we exchange tuition, but not housing and meals like on ISAF. So with one of these, you would pay for 15 credit hours of USI tuition, but then you would pay the housing and the meals, whatever the cost is at that location. So these can be great options for students, especially if you're on, something like 21st Century Scholars, where you know exactly how your aid applies to tuition. These programs in the ISAF Exchange program, you're paying USI tuition. So it's matching what you expect it to be and how your award applies. I've lumped a few of our other partners together here. Now we're moving into our partners that only do the direct programs. These are the ones where you're not competing for spaces, you're not paying exchange, you pay whatever the cost is of that program. As long as you meet the requirements, you'll be accepted. So I'm going to talk about CEA, CIEE, and ISA. All of these partners, they are more of what I call full service. They're going to provide more. Their fee is going to be a little bit higher, but then they will have on-site staff. They provide 24/7 assistance. They'll have excursions included in the price. So sometimes this works better for students who are on a tight budget because there are already some trips and activities built into it. So then you don't have to worry about spending that extra outside of the program. You can just do those ones as your main activities. They have their own scholarships. CEA, for example, has an automatic grant for USI students. If you do a summer program, you automatically get $500 off. Semester, you automatically get $1,000 off. So they're all great programs. They have a lot of overlap in their locations. So check out their prices, because sometimes one is more affordable than the other for the same location and the same university. Yeah, and they have a variety of types of programs. So some are at study centers, which is basically a classroom setting that the program runs, where they hire faculty members to teach the classes. but it's going to be all American students who are studying abroad through the partnership who will be enrolled at those universities. So that can be really comfortable for students who are wanting to go to a location where it's a very different language, or where you just don't want to have to worry about adjusting to a different way of teaching. But if you're looking for a really immersive experience, you're going to want to look for the ones that are enrolled directly at international universities. So you'll still get the benefit of the support personnel from the partner, but you'll be taking all of your classes and doing all your activities directly in the university. We partner with a program called Semester at Sea, which is a very unique program where you get on a cruise ship and you take a 100-day voyage around the world. You take all of your classes while you're on the ship, and then it ports normally pre-COVID at 10 to 13 different countries. What they're doing this upcoming spring, this is going to be their first voyage post-COVID. They are basically going around Europe and into the Mediterranean. So all of the locations are European locations. So they're only stopping at 8 locations this time. So it's reduced, but the program is still running. It's a great experience to see a lot of different countries and learn about those different countries with each location. They have a docent from that country get on board the ship when you leave the previous docking to teach you about that country. So you learn about that country before you go there, and then you'll have time to explore the country when you're at port. We call it the Cadillac of study abroad, though, because it's a very pricey program. So if this is one that's on your list of dream programs, you definitely have to plan ahead in budgeting to figure out how to make this one affordable. I have had high financial needs students who have had this as their dream program, who worked really hard and were able to secure a lot of external funding, as well as funding from the program itself and scholarships through USI to make this a reality. So if this is your dream program, it can be possible, but it is expensive and will take a lot of additional work for those scholarships. You may have heard of Harlaxton College. Harlaxton College is the University of Evansville's college campus in Grantham, England. With the Harlaxton College, they partner with about 20 other US universities, but at any given time, the majority of the students there are going to be University of Evansville students. So often it's about 80% U of E students and 20% students from other colleges and universities. You get to live in the manor here. It's incredibly beautiful. You live there, you take all of your classes there. Food services are there. It's American style teaching, so you don't have to adjust to the UK teaching style. There is if you go for a semester, a required British Studies course, which is 3 credits. If you want to do the second British Studies course, then you could get 6 credits of British Studies. Most of the Harlaxton courses have been already evaluated and pre-approved, so it makes it a little easier to see in advance exactly how those classes will come in. Harlaxton puts a big emphasis on travel. So most students who do this program do tend to spend more money on the personal travel than students who do other programs. But overall, it's a pretty affordable program for going to the United Kingdom. We still have faculty-led programs. However, these are kind of shifting and changing. These are just some examples of programs that have happened in the past. These are not necessarily programs that are running this summer or the next summer. The best way to know about faculty-led programs, if you're interested in that, is to ask your professors, because often, they'll be planning them farther in advance. So they'll start talking about them and start trying to see if students are interested in them well before they get to the approval process and enter it into our office. So ask around in your departments, ask your professors if they know if anybody's doing a program, and you can start considering those. With the faculty-led, you tend to travel out together as a group, do the program and come back. But then how it's designed varies a lot. Sometimes it's you go on site somewhere and the course is taught by the USI professor and you come back together. Sometimes it's incorporating into a summer institute at a university abroad where you may or may not take classes with the USI professor, and there'll be other students there too, not just USI students. And sometimes it's like the tropical biology in Belize, where you take the class here during the summer, and then the class ends with a trip to the site for a week or so. There are internship opportunities all over the world in most majors. I want to highlight, since we're specifically doing the Global Salon here, I want to highlight the New Lanark Historical Internship Scholarship. So New Lanark, Scotland, the founder of New Lanark was also one of the founders of New Harmony, Indiana. The university has a partnership with New Harmony and a long relationship with New Harmony. So this scholarship was designed specifically for students to go and spend the summer doing an internship at the New Lanark Historical Site. It has been designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And they're really looking for students who have an arts administration interest, or sometimes public relations can be a helpful one for that one. And they really like to have students who have been involved with New Harmony. This is a fully paid scholarship. It pays for your flight, pays for your housing, pays for everything. So it is a great opportunity and something that if you're interested in, make sure you start getting involved in New Harmony, volunteer, work as a tour guide, and get involved, and consider taking some arts administration as well. We have other scholarships available through our office, through the Center for International Programs. We have several different scholarships that are all listed here. We're fortunate to be granted $50,000 each year for study abroad scholarships, and we use every last penny of that. So make sure that you apply for those scholarships. I'm surprised at how many students don't take the time to apply. You definitely don't want to be one of those students. You're only competing with other USI students. It's a lower level of competition, so make sure that you do it. I want to highlight the Global Engagement Scholarship. That one is a research scholarship where you find a faculty mentor here at USI that helps you narrow down your research project. And then your application is actually your research proposal and a letter of support from your mentor. And then when you go abroad, you conduct that research. When you come back, you don't have to write a big research paper, but you do a public presentation on campus during our global engagement forums. And that presentation is basically research paper format. We're not aiming for publishable research with this. It's more an opportunity for you to learn how to do research a little bit better, working directly with a faculty mentor, and to see how research is done differently in different countries. Things that we require here may be required there. They may have a different layer that you have to go through. And students who do it really enjoy that process. There are some international scholarships. I want to point out the Gilman Scholarship. That one is through the U.S. Department of State, and that is specifically for students who are receiving Pell Grants. So if you are receiving Pell Grants, you definitely want to apply for the Gilman Scholarship. We do have USI students who receive the Gilman Scholarship almost every term. We have at least one student who receives it. So it's worth your time. Sometimes students think, oh, it's national, I'm never going to stand a chance. They give out a lot of those scholarships, so it's definitely worth your time. I can help you with your application. I'll review essays. I'm sure some of your professors would as well. And then the program partners have scholarships as well. So as you're thinking about studying abroad, you want to be thinking about what classes do you need to keep you on track here. We don't want anybody going abroad and taking classes that don't count towards your USI degree. This should be a seamless part of your academic program. You want to think about what locations you're comfortable going to and what are the current COVID restrictions in those locations. Thinking about your budget and when is the best time for you to go. Some majors have sequential classes that are not offered every term, so you wouldn't want to go abroad when course one of a sequence is offered and then you can't take that course again until the next year, because that's going to put you behind in your studies. Your academic advisor can be very helpful with figuring out when to go, when's the best time. So you want to review programs online. That little earth icon in My USI clicks you through directly to our study abroad database. So you can start looking at some program options. And once you've identified some things that you're interested in, then meet with your academic advisor and talk about those options and courses and figure out when's the best time to go. And then finally schedule an appointment with me or with Cassidy Quinn, our graduate assistant. We are doing appointments in person, virtually, by phone. We're available many different ways. And then we can talk more about your specific situation in preparing for studying abroad. All right, I'm going to turn off my screen share and we can review if we have any questions now.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to jump back in here too. I have a couple questions I think will, the questions that came to me in thinking about this is I studied abroad on multiple occasions as an undergrad. And so thinking about the first one, maybe it's not a direct answer, but the difference between family placement and dorm placement or housing arrangements, has that been impacted by COVID? Or are students still staying with families, or are there changes that they should be aware of?
That's a great question. One of the things that we're seeing is actually an increase in family placement, at least right now, but there aren't as many students going abroad. But the reason for the increase in family placement is because if the situation gets worse, if there's another lockdown at that location, it's much more comfortable to be with a family who's local, who knows how to get food deliveries, has a full fridge, than it is to be in a dorm or an apartment dealing with that situation alone and isolated. That's a good question.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that that's helpful for students to know that. And I would say for any students, stay with the family. That's the best way to do it in my experience. So learn the language that way, learn the culture. Another question that came to mind is, you mentioned the restrictions that the US government has placed on countries. Now, with regard to the second part of those restrictions, right, there's the things about violent crime or about political instability. Do those come to us, or does the USI decision, is it based on the country as a whole? Because I know sometimes the US government sends out information based on a region, like you can go to the country but stay away from this region. So how does that play into the decision for USI and for our students?
Yeah, that's also another really good question. The US Department of State used to do that guidance based on the whole country, period. And then a few years back, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, they changed how they do their guidance to where it is more specific by states, regions, even cities. There's still an overall rating for the whole country, but there can be, different assessments within the country. So I like to use Mexico as an example. Prior to COVID-19, Mexico overall was okay, but there are regions that were do not travel or strongly reconsider travel. And we have partners with programs in the okay parts and in the do not travel parts. So our students were allowed to participate in the ones that were in the okay parts, but not allowed to participate in the ones where the Department of State has labeled that region as do not travel. So it's nice that there's that level of nuance. We also, in the policy, it states that students are not allowed to travel to locations that have that higher rating. So if you were to go to that program in Mexico, for example, that has the use normal caution rating, and you want to take a weekend trip to go see something that's in that higher level, that would not be allowed.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thank you for the information. I don't think we have any other questions, but I'm sure that students will contact you in your office if they do have questions. And so as we wrap up, I just want to thank you again for the presentation, for the information, and as well mention that please keep an eye out, everybody who's on here, for our future announcements of our Global Salon presentations. We have a couple more opportunities later in the semester, and so those will be made available as we define all of the details. So thank you again, Melissa. We appreciate it, and everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you.